Lesson number 81 is all about multiplication and division of signed numbers. And by signed numbers, we just mean positive numbers or negative numbers. So our first problem is to simplify. And we have 4 times 2. Remember, when the parentheses touch, that just means multiplication. So 4 times 2, that must be equal to 8. Then we have negative 4 times 2. When we multiply a negative number times a positive number, what we're saying is the negative means the opposite of a positive. So the opposite of a positive, that must be a negative. So we're going to get an answer of negative 8. Because negative 8 would be the opposite of positive 8. Then we have negative 4 times negative 2. Well, what this problem is saying is the opposite of a negative. The opposite of a negative, that's a positive. So we're going to come back to our original answer of positive 8, even though we're multiplying a negative times a negative. Let's look at some division problems. Here we have 8 divided by 2. Well, that must be 4. If we have negative 8 divided by 2 for problem B, we're saying what's the opposite of a positive? The opposite of a positive must be a negative, so negative 8 divided by 2 must be negative 4. And then negative 8 divided by negative 2, if we want to figure out what that's equal to, we're saying what's the opposite of a negative? Well, that's a positive. So our answer again is back to positive 4. Let's look at our next problem. Here we have to simplify. We have negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 2 times positive 4. Well, negative 3 times negative 3, that's the opposite of a negative, so we're going to get a positive, and 3 times 3 must be 9. So negative 3 times negative 3 must also be positive 9. Then we're going to multiply that by negative 2. Then we're going to multiply that by positive 4. Negative 9 times negative 2 first. We're saying what's the opposite of a positive? Well, that's a negative. So negative 2 times 9 is negative 18. And then we have negative 18 times 4. Well, negative 18 times 4, well, 18 times 2 is 36. And if we double 36, we get 72. And we're looking for the opposite of a positive. The opposite of a positive is a negative, so our answer must be negative 72. We could box it and move on to the next question. Now notice some patterns as we go here. If we have like negative 3 times 2, that's equal to a negative answer, negative 6. But if we have negative 3 times negative 2, that turns into a positive answer of 6. Let's say we were to have negative 3 times negative 2 times negative 2. Well, negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6, and 6 times negative 2 must be negative 12. The interesting thing here is that when we have an odd number of negatives that we're multiplying, like 1 or 3, we always get a negative answer. And if we have an even number of negative numbers that we're multiplying, we're going to get a positive answer. And that will always hold true. Let's write that out. So, if we have an even number of negatives that we're multiplying, we get a positive answer. If we have an odd number of negatives as we're multiplying, we get a negative answer. This works with both multiplication and division. Let's look at our next problem. Is the following product positive or negative? So we don't even have to come up with a numerical answer. All we have to come up with is it positive or negative? So let's count our number of negatives and see if there's an even number or an odd number, since this is multiplication. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Well, 6 that's an even number. And if you look back at your notes, an even number, well, an even number must give us a positive answer. If you read the directions of this problem carefully, That's good, because you're all done. If you didn't read the question carefully, you might have been tempted to multiply all these together. It's going to take you a long time, and you're going to have a huge answer. You're going to have a positive answer, but all you need to know for this question is that it's positive and not negative, because we have an even number of negative numbers that we're multiplying together. Lesson practice will be on page 255. Make sure you've got your notes complete, and I'll see you during our next class.